Hello, Patsy. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Hi, Lorenz.
I'm really excited to have this conversation together with you today. And I guess where I would like to start is just asking you about this word transformation. Obviously, this is the Transformational Learning Summit, and everybody has a slightly different relationship and understanding of that word. And I'd love to hear what your relationship to that word is.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting inquiry, like right from the get-go. No small talk here. uh, my relationship with the word transformation actually changes because I remember there was one point that I reflected upon this word and I thought, oh my God, this word is just so overused. Everywhere I turned, somebody would offer some kinds of talk or some kind of experience, and they would say it's a very transformative, you know, feeling blank. And that was when I realize something um, that what transformation means to me. So yes, maybe in a smaller scale, you can say that uh, a momentary inspiration that arises that refreshes your perception. That moment in and of itself can be transformative to that particular perspective. Uh, yes, it can be said that way. But for me, personally, as you ask, what is it for me, right? For me, that transformation is huge. It's a lot more. Is a culmination of those kind of experiences that eventually cause a uh, completion of uh, the chrysalis, the chrysalis uh, process, like the coming out of the cocoon,
Hmm.
that uh, who I am and how I relate to the world is no longer recognizable comparing to prior to the cocooning.
Hmm.
So it's and most people don't know me because I don't consider myself as a public figure, except the last 5 years, I became kind of a semi-public figure within the community space of Charles Eisenstein, who is my work partner. And also, I share the same last name with him because we share 3 children. I am his former wife. So, because through him, I become a little bit more visible by the like greater world, so to speak. And I mention that is because few people know like my whole life story. I have a very interesting life that I went through lots of these processes. And so people who I met in different part of my life, they will consider me as probably unrecognizable to them.
Hmm.
And I thought that is a very interesting aspect, which I come to not just accept but cherish. Like in other words, I feel like a true transformation for me is also the completion of letting go of who I was, my old identity, or my old identities, plural, and and knowing that there is more ahead of me.
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
yeah.
I feel like part of the work that you're doing now, particularly with the new and ancient story community, is about creating a space for that kind of transformation. Is that like how do you, in the context of your online work, how do you think about, oh, this, we want this to be a transformational space, or what's the
Mm.
relationship to the concept of transformation in the community and program work that you're doing now?
Yeah. I appreciate the structure of your question. It's very precise and very specific. Interestingly, that I'm gonna respond in a way that is not very not without a lot of specificity,
Mm,
because the initial intention was very spontaneous. The initial intention was basically observing that how social media, the major social media like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, uh, is not really working well. It's so disruptive that you'll know moment of stillness and space for people to dive into something that is more constructive and more intimate, and and feeling like safer, because going to, at the time anyway, in year 2000, going into social media is like going into battlefield, a psychic battlefield. So and that's also the time when this particular tool, Mighty Network, becomes available. So we thought that that would be an opportunity to hold a container for people to practice with each other. And prior to that, which we have attempted many times, and each time ended up to be we have to close down the platform because of a similar trajectory, that people come in with a very high ideal, and everybody comes in with a sort of a individualized ideology of what a more beautiful world should look like, and ended up having a lot of disagreements at some point. So there is this honeymoon period, and
mm,
there this exploration period, and then there is this conflict period. And when the past several rounds, when we hit the conflict period, we just ended up closing down the platform. And until so that's like a learning curve. So what I have learned from that is that having a very clear guideline and simple guideline that based on principle rather than rules is a very important part of of the foundation to hold a container for a
mm,
network to thrive. So a new and ancient story right now is in its it's over it's in its fourth year now, beginning of the fourth year. Uh, and we have gone through like one incarnation, meaning that we had to reset and close the platform for a few weeks in order to reopen it and the to tweak our guidelines and tweak our vision uh, from learning what didn't work. Uh, yeah, so have I lost you yet? Are you still with me?
No, this is so rich. I really appreciate the specificity of it. I gave you a precise question. You did actually give me a very specific answer, so I appreciate the nature of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and what I really appreciate is you having this opportunity to unpack this territory where you have very real, direct, on the ground experience. So we're not talking about theoretical communities or theoretical online spaces. We're talking about actual online spaces and the things that come up. And it's also interesting to hear this element that because many of the people that are drawn to the community are drawn through Charles's writings, and so there is a certain ideological aspect there that maybe not everybody interprets the content in the same way, and so they might show up into the community with slightly different orientations to what this beautiful world that I know that our hearts know is possible might look like. So I'd love to touch a little bit about or expand more on these things that didn't work. Like, what is it about the first few iterations that specifically that didn't work, and what have you learned from that process that seems to be working now?
Mm. Um, Thank you for reflecting on that. I want to bring in the perspective of why are we doing this? Because
Mm.
this is a question that Charles and I ask. And also, we invite a lot of our volunteers also to ask this question of themselves. And our community guideline has a acronym called WAIT. Why am I talking? We were encouraged to, before we say anything, to reflect on why we even want to share or say what we want to say. And that's a very deep and profound practice. So oftentimes, so you heard this phrase, problem happen at the top, right? So this top doesn't, and you said that our audience here are going to be primarily people who are in leadership position, where you have to, you hold space and manage organizations. So so similarly, with my work, I am in that position as well. So to me, what really helps uh, for me to understand or being able to see what works and what doesn't work, I actually have to initially really examine within about my motives,
Mm.
explore with myself, like why is it important for me to do this, and um, and to whom I'm doing this with, and am I on the right path, and is my perspective correct? There's a lot of self-inquiry questions um, kind of get mixed in this, and I notice the more I have unintegrated shadow motives, the more things is not working.
Mm.
Okay, and and a new and ancient story, Charles's work is very much spiritually based, although he's very intelligent and very capable in and applying spirituality in various niche like economic, uh, society, politics, ecology, right? And fundamentally, this his platform, a new and ancient story, or Substack or website, um, it's a sort of like individualizations of speaking the same truth, adapting the different vocabularies and languages to reach different segment of the society for development of the soul,
Mm.
development of the consciousness. He doesn't use those language. Those are my language and my words, because I'm a yogi and I love using those abstract language. And that's why we work well in this way, because we understand each other. And also in the society that the world that we're watching today, a lot of what doesn't work also is what didn't work in a smaller container, because smaller container is like a microcosmo, right? Did I say it correctly?
Yep. Microcosm. Yep.
Yeah, microcosm. So so therefore, the inner work and outer work are like interweave, interconnected. You can't like separate them. Um, so, so now I'm gonna narrow down to what didn't work. Is the people's um, with your great intention of do good to serve humanity, stepping into a social media platform or online community, having that intention while also having unresolved shuttle and consciousness, and uh, and creating a like blind spot of self-righteousness. And when two opposing opinions clash, it becomes conflict. And when conflict happens, uh, the it's hard to resolve in an online situation, because
Mm,
in an online situation you're not with people, you can't really feel their embodied vibration, but rather uh, you when you read opinions that is critical or oppositional, uh, you create an internal experience, which is called trigger. You get triggered because of uh, maybe your own unresolved issue. So you ended up, instead of having a relationship with the person who is speaking, you are actually having a relationship with what you think that person is speaking.
mm,
And then people talk past each other, and then it gets so it could get really really difficult, which was what we experienced many times, that people just wouldn't stop hurting each other with the words. So we had to, like, the several times before was we closed off our Facebook page, we shut down a couple of other, I don't even remember the name of the platform now, forums, to say, we don't want to deal with this anymore. And then we just keep repeating that until um, when we had Mighty Network, that we begin to learn about our own personal responsibility in this. Because Charles and I, we have the tendency of like being very idealistic, that trusting in people's um, like innate goodness. And this
mm,
is a very good quality to have. We don't ever want to lose that. But the part, especially for me, what I had to learn, because as you can see, I'm an Asian female, and maybe it's genetically, I have the tendency to uh, allow, to embrace, and then my boundary has been really loose, right? So uh, those didn't really help, that I realized that, because ideally in a smaller container like family, right, I can and direct community, when I can interact directly with people, that's really helpful and very powerful archetype to have for healing and holding family together. But an online situation, I have to, that's my learning curve. Actually, I'm expressing that right now, is that I have to learn to say no sometimes, and I have to practice uh, learning how to say no at times, when in order to hold a fluid boundary, uh, to dance between the boundary of that I need to hold for myself and for the sake of community, or online platform not falling apart, versus trusting the intelligence in the entropy and the disruption, right? And I couldn't do this myself. And the reason why, it's more and more, seems like we are more and more able to hold resonance, rather to allow the disruption to happen within the resonance, is because I notice I have more and more allies and more um, friends who are doing similar things, to work on uh, integrating our own whatever things that will carry with us, to motivate us wanting to do good for others. And and through that, we kind of gradually and collectively more and more able to hold conversations that are difficult. Uh, Difficult conversation has its place and it's very, very important in order for us to grow. Because if everywhere is light and love, uh, nothing is going to happen in the universe, right?
Mm,
So those, you know, and I even see there are some particular, like some minority characters, they kind of take it upon themselves to stir up the pot, you know, to disrupt. And my part of the transformation for me as a host to this to an online space is today I'm able to see the merit more and more, and have a big smile in it, uh, while I'm kind of walking alongside that. Versus 5 years ago, I would feel a lot of anxiety, and I
mm,
will carry that anxiety and ask for help. Uh, so, but I did ask for help nonetheless. But the result is very different. So I compare the result of 5 years ago and today. Um, the primary difference is um, that I feel a resilience and a fortitude and trust in myself, that as long as my intention is noble and I'm willing to stay curious and I'm willing to ask uh, for help and input, there is always a way to go forward. And with that knowing, the anxiety is gone, except kind of just patience and curiosity and just working with the flow.
mm. I really appreciate a lot of what you shared, starting from, one of the causes of tension, this blind spot certainty that, that I think many people in the world, not just in a community space, have a really difficult time holding space for opposing points of view without that becoming a source of major tension. And one of the things that I feel like a transformational space offers, and certainly I'm kind of hearing what you are leaning towards here, is a space where that can be held and explored with more curiosity. So there's a couple of things that I'm curious about. One is that you talked about saying no, and kind of the developmental journey for yourself of being able to say no to things in the interest of the community. And I'm curious, what um, can you give me a specific example of something that you maybe had to say no to serve the community?
Mm, okay, thank you. Uh, Let me think of reason one. Oh, this is kind of funny when I think of it. I'm laughing because uh, all humans, including myself, uh, have the tendency of uh, value our own value, thinking that we know things, right? And we'll make suggestions or make.
Really?
Oh, really? Yes. So the times that I say no was one time there was an incident. Actually, there's more than one incident. This is kind of repeat itself at different times in different scale uh, on different subject. So is like uninvited input or suggestions. And I think those uninvited input suggestions some of them are helpful, but what I noticed, a lot of them ended up to be irrelevant, or ended up to be their suggestion coming from a very subjective state. They would say, oh, this particular thing online function is not user friendly because I don't know how to use it. But they didn't really have the context of why it's even done that way, or they are relating to um, other people's subjective experience, right?
Mm.
So their, in other words, their suggestions would be sometimes completely irrelevant, and uh, and then I have to explain that. And say no. And there was one time after my explanation uh, on why the space is, kind of divided in this certain way, so we can differentiate uh, the spaces that are shared, like a common area for all of the members, and then there are for specific forums and specific topics, such as sanity project forum or a course discussion forum. um, so 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 that concept is very simple, right? You have a common area, kind of like a building. You have a communal dining hall, and then you have specific room for specific purpose. Seems very simple, but when you put that in an online 2D situation where you have main menu and you click, it's hard for people to translate that 3D concept to a flat screen. So I understand and sympathize that people are not able to get it, and they just want a something like uh, a universe, circles and spaces that has uh, no tier layers, so to speak. So I had to say no, right? Say, sorry, I can't make changes like that.
Mm.
And uh, yeah, so that's an example. Another example was that people wanted to do fundraising for their projects in the network space, or bring in uh, events that include people who are not in this network. So we have to say, say a modified no, say both yes and no, because there is a merit in um, bringing people who are not in this network. Because we're all people. We don't have to like divide ourselves as, oh, we are a NAS member and you're not. Therefore, we can mingle. But rather, the reason why this is actually members' decision, not my decision. The reason why that our members prefer to have sort of a clear differentiation. When they see an event, they can tell that, oh, this is for NAS members only, or, oh, this include outside member events, because on our platform, there's a really high level of intimacy and personal story being shared. People really like go deep in working with their personal lives, and sometimes this kind of intimacy is hard to hold if you don't know who you're gonna meet on a Zoom call, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are like two examples where
Mm.
I have to say no.
What I'm really appreciating, and I'm curious about your reflection on this, is that part of your journey with building this community has been a process of prototyping through direct experience, getting feedback, and kind of cultivating the capacity to understand what feedback is relevant and what feedback is not. And in some ways that seems obvious, but what I think really is real for me is that there's a certain amount of time you have to invest into the process to cultivate that capacity, right? There isn't necessarily a formula that's like, here's how you build your amazing transformational relational community, just do ABC. It's actually a living process where you have to try it, and then things happen, and then figure out for yourself, for the context of what you're doing and the specific people that you're working with, like what works, what doesn't, what's relevant, what isn't. And I'm wondering, like, if that resonates for you as a process, or if today you feel like, you know what, actually, having gone through this whole thing, I know exactly, like, ABC, how someone else should create their community.
Wow. uh, I would say definitely, I resonate deeply with not knowing
Hmm.
because I want to see if I can remember this quote from that is in Ursula Le Guin's novel called the Left Hand of Darkness. So in the novel, there is a part. There was this race that they perfected foretelling. They can predict. They can predict answers. They know answers to all the questions. So people come from all over their world to ask for answers. And one time, the protagonist asked the one of the foretellers, the head of the foreteller, saying that if you have this kind of power of not knowing the answers to questions and predict futures, why don't you use it? And the foreteller said that, don't you see, our we are here. The reason why we come here to be in this to create this particular tribe, because we come to realize how useless knowing the answer to the wrong questions are. And that's what we were precisely trying to demonstrate. And then through a series of dialogue, the head of the foreteller asked the protagonist, the only question there really is, the only certainty to a question is that we all die. And um, and life, what makes life magical, it's permanent, unbearable uncertainty. Okay, so in other words, the nature of life is change and it's uncertain. And the how I, like, how would anyone really know what is the right way of doing things? And, and the truth is, what caused the dissonance of the world is everybody thinks they know how to do something. So I left this question about prototype is, I think the prototype, could, establishing prototype, I took your course, which I thought was brilliant, and I love the contemplating the prototype. The thing is, so while I was contemplating about the prototype, I realized that uh, that prototype is very personal to my individual experience. So I translate that prototype as an experimental structure, and and because it's experimental, that means it will change depending on the element of being that ended up become involved in it. In other words, the co-creativity and co-defining what the prototype is with others is inevitability. Yeah. So yeah, so that's why I feel like instead of prescribing answers, is like telling stories and allow people to listen to the answers for themselves.
Hmm.
Maybe a more effective way of conveying insights.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Communicating in stories is like a cultivated art form. And I love that context in the space of a community. And also what you just shared about co-inviting participation in the formulation of a prototype. One thing that I'm hearing and I'm curious about is um, something you said about more resourcing from within the community, like people stepping up into, it almost sounds like people stepping up into like moderator roles and somehow participating in holding the space when difficult situations do come up. So I'm wondering in that context, one, in your previous communities, was that less available, or you just didn't know to ask for it? And then today, in the version of Na's New and Ancient Story that's running, um, is is it is it that for some reason you have less challenging conversations, or is it that you just have this better support structure with volunteers that are somehow keeping the coherence of the space together?
Mm, uh, Both. It's one is we have less. I think because there's several rounds of incarnation, people there there are people returning and there are new people, and people who have been coming back, they become more rooted in this culture and practice. So they became a community moderator without the moderator badge. And in the previous incarnations, we have learned that having a moderator badge hasn't worked out well because people are uh, allergic to authority, allergic to badges, right? And with the moderators, with moderators, official moderator particularly, uh, from my personal experience, it feels like it creates more trouble than good. Because when moderator interject a conversation, or when a difficult conversation is unraveling, and moderator come up there to join the conversation, they have a badge moderator, and then people immediately have yellow flag or red flag and resisting their even words of empathy or comfort or wisdom. It would just happen right away. So in New and Ancient Story, instead of putting our focus in moderation, we emphasize in expressing your gift. We emphasize in empowering people to use the tools uh, and to express and experiment with your ideas. In fact, kind of similar to a sutra, because with sutra, anybody can come in and create a space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's similar to that. People are empowered to come in to learn the tools and to facilitate events or create projects. And to invite participation. So that has become more and more of our focus, rather than online discourse of hashing out ideologies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, and you mentioned that at some point with the NOS community, you paused it and you had to take a few weeks off. What precipitated that, and then what changed when you came back?
Okay. When people come together, there has to be some kinds of commonality, like some kinds of anchor or some kind of gravitation that bring them together. So with a new and ancient story, the gravitational point is the content that Charles provided, and at the time, and still is actually. And what um, what catalyzed the stopping was at some point there was a conversation on genders that members just cannot come to um, a place where they could see the merit and interrelatedness and the developmental aspect of all this. Instead, it triggered a lot of pain in people. And then people kind of distract themselves by instead of taking responsibility of where they are and how they are, they begin to target what they perceive as leaders and require us to be responsible to take sides. It's a very, very difficult situation. And so we ended up saying no to that, like, no, not wanting to take sides. And then and see, and that's our learning curve here, because we knew that we didn't want to take sides, but we didn't know how to hold a container without taking sides.
Mm.
So it ended up these two sides. Uh, when there's only when there's left only two sides without a larger force to hold them together, there's always going to be a winner side and a loser side, right? So ended up we lost a big group of community members, and then the ambiance of the community started to feel stagnant.
Mm.
So and that's the so Charles himself feels like he's done, like his duty is to continue to write content, and then he left for me to hold the network space, which that was like one of the biggest learning curve that I have. I didn't really feel like I have the capacity to continue. And with deeper introspection, and this is what I come to realize, that all good things come to an end, right? Like we talked about, the only certainty is death. So why wouldn't a lifespan of a good network like that as well? So uh, maybe so I thought that maybe it will be a time to have that stage come to a closure. And so when the process, when the news, when I put out the news, I have a group of pillar of the community that I spoke to, and say that, maybe we should just close the community or hand this community to someone else to host. There were a lot of resistance. So in other words, the community didn't want to die. So I thought, well, since it didn't want to die, how about that we reincarnate it? We just have everybody uh, uh, deactivate their account, and then we just wait to see what would emerge. And even that has a lot of aspect that's at play, including Charles. Charles was very supportive of this reset, because he feels like maybe this reset will give everything a fresh start. So we did close it off, and we did, before we close it off completely, we communicate to the community for like 3 months, 3 or 4 months. And at the time we call it community because there are element of community in it. But when we did the reset, we were very mindful about not addressing this network as community, because knowing the downside, and it's impossible to correct the downside of being online, that maybe being online, it's impossible to hold a community in that scale of thousands of people, but rather under a network, um, community can form itself through smaller groups. So since our reset, that has been our focus, and that seems to be working really well. And once again, I'm also open to a possibility of changing form, which I don't know what it is. So I'm kind of just working with everybody
Mm, mm.
to
And,
create. Yeah.
and so this idea of the forming the smaller groups, would you say that the Sanity Project is a version of that, where you kind of have like a smaller focused cohort of people in a specific program?
Um, Sanity Project is so this is a new and ancient story, the large umbrella, and then Sanity Project is here, and then course forum is here, and then members specialty group is here. So Sanity Project is like parallel to other groups, and within the Sanity Project, we kind of coach people to use the network to create smaller, we call it the sanity pods, a smaller pods,
Mm,
a smaller group of people of 10 to 25. And and they would go through content together. And then we also have guidelines for people to create their special interest group. And there are a few very thriving communities with under the new and ancient story, which I have nothing to do with. I just kind of help them set up and direct them to where to find resources to teach themselves how to use the space. And of course, the any subgroup that is under the new and ancient story have to adhere to our community guideline, which is you know a standard and practice on how to interact and communicate with one another when situation gets difficult. Yeah.
mm, mm. Okay, so there's a couple of directions I want to go here. One is to get a little more deeper into the Sanity Project and exactly what that is. But before we go all in that direction, I just want to pause here on the community guidelines and um, I I guess specifically, how are those developed? Is that the same? Earlier you used the word principles. Is that the same thing?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Community guideline is a set of principles, actually.
Okay. And how were those formulated? Was that something that you and Charles just put together, or was it something that was created by the community? And then how is that when someone joins the community, how are they introduced to those principles?
So the the guideline itself is written by Charles, and when people land on our landing page before they become a member, that's the first thing they will read, what this platform is about and its functions and its posting guideline. So the sense of principle is it's about the practice of being authentic without diverting uh, your pain and trigger towards uh, someone else
Mm,
or towards hate, and our responsibility as a member is to hold space based on that for each other. In other words, to express empathy and compassion and to express our difficult emotions of anger and frustration without blaming and dehumanizing others. So yeah, so it's so in other words, if everybody practices, the community can really moderate itself.
mhm, mhm. I mean, if everybody in the world practiced this,
Yeah.
the world could really function well.
Oh, totally.
So, and then when someone joins the community, how are they introduced? Is this just like make sure you read the guidelines, or is there any sort of process to acculturate them?
Uh, when people click on request to join, they will be asked a series of questions, including whether they agree with our guidelines or not.
Mm,
Yeah.
got it.
And if they don't, we don't disapprove of them. Instead, we will have someone communicate to them why, like attempting
Mm,
to understand. And usually, unless people are like outright offensive and just, like disagreeing and obviously they were not sincere in working together. We approve everyone. So because even there are very occasional time people say that no, I don't think I can do that. Oftentimes they have a very compelling reasons, and when being communicated, oftentimes we ended up arriving at the same place of agreement anyway.
mm. I love that. I love the thoughtfulness of that. That's honestly one of the, on a slightly different note related to Charles's works, one of the things I really appreciate is his approach to the pay what you can model. Is that it's not just a pay what you can, that there is actually he created some amazing language that really invites people to reflect on the value of what they're getting and what they can offer. And so it's not just, pay what you can, it's really an invitation to think deeply and reflect on what you can pay. And I love the thoughtfulness of this as well, that it's so easy to put together some guidelines and put them on a section on your site and then have like a blanket yes or no, do you agree? But like everything is so much more complex than yes or no. And really taking that to heart as a onboarding process, where if someone says I don't agree, well, thank you for sharing that authentically. Can we understand more about your position, as an opening into a conversation and meaningful understanding? Like that really feels like living your philosophy, like walking the talk in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, and thanks to our volunteers, like over the course of last, 3, 4 years, I found myself connecting and having friends who are, very deeply practicing this principle, and they would be the people who are communicating with with a request that requires further communication.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned volunteers. Do you have any specific practices for recruiting volunteers or enrolling them, or is it just very organic?
It's very organic, and also people have to ask for it because we don't advertise that we have volunteer. We need
Mm.
volunteers, and also one of the agreement of being a volunteer is that uh, people won't know that you're a volunteer.
They won't know that you're a volunteer.
No, they won't
Yeah.
know.
So you
Yeah,
have agreements. You do have agreements. So once someone says, "Hey, can I contribute?" You have a
yeah.
process of onboarding them into a contribution role.
Right. Just conversations because and oftentimes this qualification process is to ask the same question: why do you want to do this? uh,
Mm.
and then usually is people wanting to help others, and why do you want to help others? And then so there's a series of questions, 21 questions, and um
Really, 21?
no, just kidding.
Like,
Yeah,
wow, that's
yeah.
serious.
Yeah. 21 questions is a game. Yeah. So I
I
yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so uh what we're really looking for, which is have you heard of Thich Nhat Hanh's interbeing phrase?
Yes.
Interbeing. Okay. Um is what we're really looking for is for people's readiness to really investigate into what interbeing means, not on an intellectual level, but on an embodied uh, experiential level. Because interbeing, when you really feel into it, it's it's undescribable. Almost like it's a when you can see that the one that you're servicing or the one that you're disagreeing with is actually part of you, then how you will respond to the person and situation is very different. So our volunteers, they're right now, there's a core team of people who are doing this work in the background. Um, the the currency for them, because we do things, we need reciprocity, right? So instead of being paid with money, what they are being paid with is their skill. They develop themselves in a way that they would not otherwise have been able to. And also relationships, that what come out of it is deeper and more meaningful relationship with others. And also and with that, those are real values in life. And those values at some point they do translate to monetary value. So that's kind of where our goal is, like we fix our vision on the goal, right? And that's where the goal is relationship and our capacity to become a better versions of ourselves through being with each other.
Mm, mm. And I also, this, what you just shared about the volunteers not advertising that they're volunteers. That reminded me of earlier what you said about the moderators not having a badge. And it's such an interesting dynamic because we also have noticed the difference between when you say you have a small group space with a designated moderator role versus a small group space where it's self-moderated or somehow self-organized. And there's something about being in a space where it's self-organized, where people are invited to take more agency and responsibility. Sometimes when you're in a space with a moderator, it's like, oh, tell us what to do, and so there's so many interesting dynamics there around either, like you share, I haven't had the experience, but like you shared, where there's a moderator who then, becomes the like, oh, you're on their side or kind of thing. And so that creates a tension there versus a space where we're more equal. And so everybody's invited to really take responsibility and agency for the way that they show up. And then there's more of an opportunity to cultivate this relational capacity and explore interbeing, because this is like, it's not like, oh, you're in some hierarchy. We're actually here on the same level, exploring, how what the full embodied spectrum of my response to you and your response to me.
Mm. Yeah, that's what we aspire to do, and it's really, really hard to do that simply because there are these like conflicting energies. Like humans uh, grew up in this particular society, have it's so easy that we're conditioned to default to look up to the authority, giving us directions and giving us order and providing us expertise. Uh, at the same time, there's this resistance to authority, right? That we want to have our agency, but at the same time, our agency is influenced and dominated by this shadow of desiring to be the one that holds power. So it is a paradox that we're working with here. Uh, so the so I'm gonna talk about something that was very interesting, that I finally feel like I'm going to uh, be willing to be the what is it called, to be the infamous one to do this practice.
Notorious.
Yeah, no, yeah, infamous. Like
Infamous.
being known for
Yeah, yeah. Well, the word is
doing.
notorious, right? Notorious. That's kind of like where you're famous for something not so good.
Yes, famous for something that's good. Yeah, that's right. So, which is so in order, I realized that in order for a container to be available for people to feel empowered to be the host themselves, there has to be a container that's held together by someone, right? And in other words, in order for a new and ancient story to exist, someone has to be the host, to hold the space. So in the beginning, I was very hesitant to accept this role. I would tell people that, I'm not the host, or I'm not the leader, and I'm just a host. But I couldn't get away with what really is I was given this power to hold this space. uh it doesn't matter to me what I want, but it matters more to the reality, that how I use it. So after a long time of contemplation, I realized that, and knowing that problem with moderators, with having moderator position of actually create temptations for people want to serve for the wrong reason. So I thought that I would just be this, Charles and I are the network host, and that's it. We don't have any moderators. And then I strive to um, not use the power that I have as a host, but rather um, be, working on being a steward of it by sharing it with other very competent and capable, brilliant members who have their own idea and ideal and gifts to give. So a big part of my job is to meet with those people and to talk to them about my experiences, like similarly to this, so they can hold their space, like take what they can use and to hold space for their specific niche. Like in our network, there's a group called Interbeing for Musicians. It's really thriving. A lot of musicians and artists are working under the not working, like, coming together under that umbrella of developing their interbeing and give economy. And there, another example would be there's a grief group, two women who are trained, like one person is trained as a grief facilitator, and the other one is she's just a amazing elder, and they just came together and created this space and the whole space for others. And there are lots of examples. If when a new member come into a new and ancient story space, you can count on finding a lot of events to go to and to meet people and connect in that way. So so the bottom so I think my point that I'm trying to express is that maybe I serve as this matriarch, its mother of this space, a new and ancient story, but I don't really exercise my authority to lead anything, but I'm kind of just there and empower people and answer to their questions. And my primary work, when it comes to like the nitty-gritty practical things that I do, is collaborating with Charles, hosting programs when he has ideas that he wants to host programs. Then I'll collaborate with him to, like design, to output the concept into like practical space design,
Mm.
and scheduling, inviting speakers. Yeah.
So that brings me back to the Sanity Project, which
Mhm.
is I think it's the most recent program you guys ran and just recently completed.
Yes.
I think it was 6 months, right?
Mhm.
So tell me a little bit about the intention for that program and the design of the online space and the overall experience for that program.
So intention of that program is that we practice exploring what sanity is for our time, because there's a lot of insanity that's happening. And also, we're not really like issuing a conclusion of what the world is today, but rather knowing the difficulty that we all experience together as, you know, collective, that we come together to share our process, our insight. And you know, Charles has a you know, when I first met him in our 20s, he told me, you know, I heard this word archetype for the very first time in the early 90s. He told me that, you know, he taught me what archetype means. And he said that his archetype is a librarian. Okay, he's the librarian of heaven. So,
That's
yeah, so because
awesome.
yeah, he sensed that it's his duty to be able to access and tap into the the knowledge that's not necessarily yet manifested in the language of the world. So he took it upon himself that's his dharma. He felt it, and that's why eventually he wrote many books, and he maybe even like I am not as well read as him or many people, so I don't know if all of his idea were new, but I know at least some of them he had pioneered, such as sacred economic, and also the um, a lot of thoughts in the ascent of humanity, to understand the whole of the humanity in this way. So the Sanity Project came as a facet of how he expressed his archetype of being a librarian of heaven, and he used his own way of adopting the language of the politics, because you know politics is actually a very powerful way of helping changing the world, right? So so he adapted a lot of clear and strong political language with the knowledge of heaven, you know, kind of marry that together. And when he so when he put out the Sanity Project, that is, you know, with that intention of making it a way for people to connect and develop together. So he said one of the sub motto of the Sanity Project is sanity is a group project. Like we have to do it together. Yeah.
Mm,
And so with that, he so I spoke to him. It's like, so yeah, so I understand the concept part. So what about the actual outputs? And then he described to me what he want, you know, like what he may be aspiring to do. And then I just take that and put it into like a 2D design, a flat screen design. So so people can kind of find their way, and then I collaborate with him to you know, so I wrote a draft of the overall design, and then he will go through it and edit it to make it work for his idea.
mm. Is there anything in particular about the way you design the program that offers this capacity for people to connect more deeply and explore sanity together?
Could you so the specific process for me, did you say that?
Like, no, is there any particular like design element of what is it that
Mm.
makes the Sanity Project what it is? I mean, obviously you have Charles's writing, which is pretty profound, but at the same time, like, is there any like distinguishing thing about the structure of the program that you feel contributes to this intention to really allowing people to connect and to explore sanity together?
Okay. So this live program is the content is very spontaneous. So we went with a lot of spontaneity and tuning in. So so the specific content wise is that Charles would put out a video every few days or so, and the source of his video came from uh, reading people's comment and questions in the forum, and also the current news that's happening in the world. And then we have a regular live call, uh, 3 live calls a month, 2 to 3 live calls a month, one of which is with a outside speaker that's not the members of a new and ancient story network. And then the other two would be Charles having a meditation and Q&A with members, and an interactive live calls where and also because our focus is in holding space so people can connect. So our live call has a format that we use breakout room and prompts for people to interact and connect. And we also have volunteers to host post live call conversations
On the platform or on
on the
Zoom?
platform,
Mm-hmm.
on the platform within the Sanity Project.
Mm-hmm.
And also before the Sanity Project even begin, as soon as once you sign up as a member to join the Sanity Project, one of the first posts in the table of content page is to describe to you how you can use the space to facilitate conversation, discussions, or anything that you want to do that is in service to this ideal. In other words, you don't have to be a volunteer to be able to create event for each other. And I remember the very first event that was created when we first launched in June. Someone read that description and learned how to use the event page to create event. Immediately this person create a event called Sanity Circle, and there were like some 70 people joined his circle. So I was wondering how it panned out, because hosting a large Zoom circle is it can get very busy, with the technical thing on the internet. And then ever since, people just follow suit and to just express themselves and put out event out there. Yeah, and I too, I host a couple of events that has been ongoing and being, it's going really well. One is a conversation around death. The death is what makes life meaningful. So we get together once a month and uh, to talk about that subject. And yeah, yes, I love a new and ancient story network. It's a
That's so
very
cool.
yeah.
So you just completed the 6-month Sanity Project. Anything that you learned from that program? Anything you would do differently? What are your takeaways from that experience?
Okay, yeah. So one of the elements of the Sanity Project that is different than all others is called, the Sanity Pod. We have a small group of administrators to help people settling in their pods.
How
So
big is a pod?
a pod is 10 to 25 people, and then the pod within the pod is they're self-organized, and they can conduct the pod any way they want to. And I believe we have total of like 40 pods. I don't remember. I have to look it up because once I created the pod, I leave. So I don't really know what's going on within the pods. And and at the end of the pod would last for 6 months. We expressed that from the very beginning. And then after the end of the six months, if the pods wants to continue, they can request to continue. So not many parts continue or wanting to continue. So what we and the reason why was that when we initially created this format for people to join pods, we have very limited human resources. We all, we rely on volunteers, right? So so the organization part is very tedious, like putting, match people within time zone. So we try to make it less less specific. So we break into like time zone. So time zone is big, right, geographically. So people can give feedback saying that they would like to have a smaller geographic area to be in the pods because they would love to meet each other more easily. So what we would like to do differently is we would like to help people organize part in a way that is uh, more enabling them to meet in person.
So more streamlined and just being able to somehow match them by time zone better.
Yeah, this, but so the logistics is gonna be an obstacle for us to jump over, like through zip codes, and when you have like two states are big, right? And if a person located in the middle of the states or on the edge, the border of so it's become really complicated.
That's interesting. I mean, it's interesting when you start really thinking about like helping people self-organize. There are all these subtle nuances that pop up, and certainly like dealing with time is one
Yeah.
of those. Was there anything else about the program, like anything that didn't quite work out the way you expected it, or was it pretty smooth? I mean, you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, it's I think it's overall it's really good, other than the feedback on the pot
Mhm.
situation. Yeah.
Well, Patsy, thank you so much for this deep dive into the world of new and ancient story, and just I feel like there's just so much wisdom. I know before we started this conversation, you thought that we couldn't possibly talk this long about this subject, but I really appreciate how like how in depth we've gone, and I just feel like there's so many. It's such a rich and nuanced territory. Like there's so much subtlety in the way that you bring people together in reality, in the context of an online community, in the context of an online program. And I just having been in the space for 12 years now, I just feel like I'm continually learning more about like all the nuances of the territory. So I really appreciate being able to geek out with you around how you've everything you've learned and how you create your beautiful community.
Oh, thank you, Lawrence. And I think I said this to you a while back that I really appreciate Sutra's format very much because like with Mighty Network has a big downside that when I do my design work, this is something that I keep trying to overcome, is that Mighty Network, they adapted the social media algorithm kind of method, which means the post that has most reaction get spin up to the top
Mm,
in people's feed, and uh, regardless of the timing, right? So in other words, if some post or some writing that happened 2 3 years ago, there's a possibility of, if someone landed on it randomly, it will get bring up to the top. So in general, real life doesn't happen that way. You and I have a conversation today. 3 months down the road, the conversation is gone, and we integrated our conversation, become part of us, and then we move forward. But with Mighty Network, backtrack, like I said, sometimes they were difficult conversations, and they are something that may be said in the thread that is irrelevant today or outright not true. But what happened when it gets spit out to the top?
Mm.
People get re-traumatized, like people get into conversation that is uh, completely unhelpful and not constructive, right? So it has that aspect that I do not appreciate, but still, yet I have to work with the tools, and I noticed that Sutra doesn't work that way. Like Sutra's platform work with more of a real time. Um, is that right?
That's true. Yeah, we don't have any algorithmic post sorting or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, which I appreciate very much, and so maybe at some point we will migrate to Sutra, and I think and we haven't done anything right now is because uh the migration process is a huge undertaking because there are like several years of content in there. We wouldn't know what to do with that migration. But anyway, I just want to acknowledge your work. I think Sutra platform is like an upgrade from a social media type of algorithm and design element.
Thank you, Patsy. I appreciate that, and I just a deep bow of respect for the work that you do and the work that Charles does, and just the journey that we're on creating these islands of sanity in the world. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so
And
much.
Lawrence, maybe someday I'll interview you because it's you're an amazing person. Like you host this sutra. Like I see your role similar to mine as a holder for the larger container and even more sophisticated that you hold so much for the leaders of the world uh yeah, it's just really amazing, and I am very honored, and I feel like this is a cherished privilege to be able to befriend you and have this conversation with you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Patsy. Well, thank you for our rich conversation. I'm really, yeah, it's been beautiful.
Yes.
Um, so I'm gonna hit stop. Much love.